Hi there, my name is Victoria Bowler, and today we are talking about how to scaffold mallet parts for elementary musicians. A few videos ago, we looked at one of the absolute best ways to enhance a piece in elementary general music, and that is through a bordun. I won't get into all of it here, but basically a bordun just instantly adds more depth to your ensemble, and it makes things sound a lot more grounded. And then from a pedagogy stance, a bordun is often one of the earlier partwork skills that students explore in our classrooms. So it plays a really important role in our movement towards interdependent musicianship. Now, even though a bordun has a lot of benefits, sometimes it can be tricky to know exactly how to introduce them so that students are set up for success when they sit down behind a barred instrument. And there is often a fear that just moving to the instruments at all is going to cause chaos. And for that reason, a lot of times we are tempted as teachers just to stay away from adding these mallet parts at all. Today we'll look at how to scaffold instruction so that students are set up for success when they sit down behind an instrument. We'll talk about these steps in the context of a bordun, but really they can apply to any other mallet part as well. The blog post that goes along with this video has 3 examples of 3rd grade lesson segments for teaching a bordun. There's one that is really simple and short and straightforward. There's a second one that would be more appropriate for intermediate students who have had several years of experience with mallet work and part work. And then a 3rd lesson segment for students who are just starting with this skill, so the very beginning. You can use the link below to find that post. So with that said, let's jump in. Whether students are already familiar with borduns or this is their very first time trying them, there are some scaffolds that we can put in place to give support to the students who need it. And we can also just use these steps to help kind of brainstorm more ways to add creativity and artistry in our teaching process. One quick note here, you don't necessarily need to use every single one of these steps every single time you want to teach a bordun, because at some point, students just know what the different types of borduns are, and you give them the rhythm to use and tell them where to start, and they go from there. But these steps can be really helpful if mallet work is new to you as a teacher or to your students. And then even if students have lots of experience with mallet parts, if something goes south as you're teaching, then you are just in a better position to pinpoint what went wrong and course correct for next time. So in the final version of a song arrangement, it's likely that only 1 or 2 students are going to be playing the bordun, right? We're not going to have 25 students at bass xylophones. But students are going to have the most success musically and socially if every student learns the bordun part. Musically, we'll have a much easier time listening across the room and staying together as an ensemble if we know what to listen for. So everyone practices part work from the ground up. And then socially, we are sending the message that the barred instruments are not for one specific profile of musician, right? So it's not just for the strongest students or the students with the strongest sense of pulse. Everybody learns every part. Even if your drone is just using a steady beat, using body percussion or some other movement connection before you move to the instruments can really help students when it's time to actually play. The specific process you use is probably going to depend on the actual bordun that you are prepping and the specific rhythmic variation that you are going to use it with. So let's break down each type and think about some ways to prep them. If you're prepping a chord bordun, you might have students just pat their knees while they sing the song. And in the blog post for this video, this is the strategy that we were using. This is the scaffold that we were using with some of those 3rd grade lesson segments. If you look around the room as students are singing the song and patting their steady beat, and you observe that they can sing and pat that bordun pattern at the same time, or if it's not a steady beat, if it's a rhythmic pattern, if they can pat that pattern accurately while the other half of the class is singing a song, then that's an indication that they're going to have success when they transfer that pattern to barred instruments. But if you look around and see that students are not maintaining that part while the song is happening, then that's a sign that when they move to barred instruments, things are going to be a little bit chaotic. So it's best to spend some more time reinforcing this motion. If you are preparing a broken bordun, then you can have students take turns patting their knees. And this is walking, take turns walking while they are singing the song. And the key here is that tonic is going to be in their left hand. Now, understandably, most of our students are going to want to start walking with their right hand because, just statistically, most of our students are right-handed. So if you look around the room and see that students are constantly reverting back to right hand lead, that is, the right hand happens on the strong beats, that is a good sign that they might have some trouble when they move to barred instruments. If we want to prep a level bordun, we can do that by having students pat their knees and then float their hands up to pat the floor to their right. And again, the right and left distinctions are going to be important here. So we can observe students playing their part while they sing the song or while they listen to classmates sing the song. And that just helps us get a sense of how this pattern is going to go when it transfers to a barred instrument. If we are doing a level bordun but not on the same instrument, if we are prepping for a 2-instrument level bordun, then you'll have students play their knees and then pat their shoulders. Next, an arpeggiated bordun, which is the favorite for a lot of our upper elementary students. We can prep this by playing the left hand and then the right and then crossing that left hand over while we sing the song. So left, right, pat, over with the left hand, right hand again, and then we're back to the left. So there's a lot of coordination that's happening here. Or if you are starting not from the bottom up, but the top down, you would have right, left, crossover, left, right, left, crossover, left. If this is just way too much for students, number one, it's possible that maybe students just need to be a little bit older developmentally in order to do that crossover bordun. But the other thing you can try is playing just the crossover hand that's going to hit on the strong beats. So take out the hand that stays the same and just practice 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, as if you were playing a passing game. And then the nice thing is that this extra hand, it never moves. It always stays exactly in that same spot. It's just one hand that's moving back and forth. So that's a nice way to scaffold it using our body as the first instrument. Next, we can use speech. If your bordun has a rhythm, that is, if it has a pattern of long and short sounds and not just a steady beat, it can be really helpful for students to have just a tiny little phrase that they can hang on to. In a lot of classrooms, a really common one is, "Will you be my friend?" But you can also take some text from the song and assign it to your rhythm so that your rhythmic phrase, your speech that you are using, is thematically tied into the actual song. So an example of this might be in the song Alabama Gal. We could use the text, Maine, Texas, Maine, Maine. And that could be the pattern. But be careful with this, just to reiterate from the last video, we are not going to make this rhythmically very complicated because that is not the purpose of a bordun. Simple is better for what we're doing here. Especially if this kind of part work is new to you and your students, it is a great idea to practice the interdependence challenge of adding a bordun. Because it's one thing to just memorize what bars to play, but if we can't listen to each other and if we don't know where our part fits into the larger song, we are not going to have success. Because borduns are essentially a part work skill. So the mechanics of what to actually play are important, but even more important are the aural skills that lead to interdependence in an ensemble setting. And this is why we keep talking about having students play their part while they sing the song or while they listen to their classmates sing. So if we were to take that simple bordun pattern of, "Will you be my friend?" you might have half the class speak that text of the bordun and pat the rhythm, and then the other half of the class sings the song. And then you switch jobs so that students are getting the practice doing the opposite. And then the smaller your groups are, or the more physical distance between the groups, the more interdependent part work practice students are going to get. If your bordun pattern is just a steady beat, then students can practice singing the melody of the main song when they practice off the instruments. And that is just another layer of support that we can use. So far, we've talked about what the students will actually be doing for barred instrument prep, but there are a few things that we can do as teachers to really help students with their mallet performance and their part work skills as well. When it's time to actually move to the instruments, there are a few things that we can do to help students in terms of visual cues. One thing that's really easy to do is if you are modeling the bordun on an actual barred instrument, we are going to turn it around so that the low side of the instrument is on students' left and the high side is on their right. This is going to go such a long way in helping students with that spatial difference and helping them with left hand versus right hand, and then all the crossing over and all the levels and everything like that. But it does mean that we are now playing backwards. So that means that we're going to have to start our bordun patterns normally on the right hand instead of the left hand. So we are just going to need to make sure that we can practice playing our part backwards. If you are short on instruments, another way to help students out is to have some visuals of the barred instruments on the board. And then when it's time to play, when it's time to actually move to instruments, then you'll just be turned around playing that part and kind of looking back at students as you play the imaginary instrument on the board. And that kind of leads into the last thing, which is just to keep your eyes up. Because if you can't see your students, you don't know what's going on musically or from a behavior standpoint. So practice your part of singing the song and playing the bordun while you keep your eyes up, instead of just looking down at the instrument all the time. You can also practice speaking some cues that you would in a regular class, such as, oh, I see so-and-so bouncing their mallets, or, do you think our steady beat is speeding up or slowing down? Something like that. So you can work on these skills ahead of time so that you are not looking down at the instrument and kind of totally zoned out at the barred instrument while the rest of the class is playing. You can certainly move your eyes down and just glance down if you need to, but you'll find that your peripheral vision takes care of a lot of that. And guess what? The bars aren't going anywhere. The bars don't move. Okay, so we have taken a pretty detailed look at scaffolding mallet instruction for elementary musicians. We have walked through some tips for teaching borduns, like having every student learn the parts, treating the body as the first instrument, using speech for rhythm patterns, and practicing part work before we move to the instruments themselves. And we've also looked at some ways for us to be prepared as the teacher so that we can focus on the students and what they need from us. Again, we don't need to necessarily use every single one of these scaffolds every single time, but it's nice to know that we have them in our toolkit. If you found this video helpful, or if you have any follow-up questions, I would be thrilled to hear from you. You can leave a comment below, you can shoot me an email, I'm victoria@victoriabowler.com, or you can find me on Instagram. I am @victoriabowler. Thank you so much for watching, and happy teaching!